Okay, welcome to take 10, 9, somewhere in there. It's Ray Goodship from St. Andrew's United Church, and this is a second installment of our daily reflection, and so hopefully I can pick up the pace a little bit and actually be able to have a daily reflection for you. Today I'm going to read a passage from Luke that has to do with the idea of neighbor and being a neighbor. It's a very familiar passage, I think, from Luke around the Good Samaritan. And so I'll share the story and then give some thoughts about what this has to say or to us in these times, in this circumstance, about being the neighbor. So Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 37, and I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. So just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" And the lawyer answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" And Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved by pity. And he went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on him. When he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back I will repay you whatever more you spend." Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The lawyer said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Thanks be to God. So who is my neighbor? Walter Brueggemann says that the authentic gospel faith is about living a life of discipleship, and discipleship is extending oneself for the sake of the neighbor. So being a neighbor for the sake of the neighbor. And so Luke's passage is, of course, the gold standard for our understanding of who and what, who is our neighbor and how are we neighbors, even though the Bible uses the word neighbor 190 odd times depending on the translation. And most of those references have to do with the ethic and of neighborliness, compassion, care, treatment, relationship, what's fair. Um, you know, but Luke's passage pulls it all together in that one story, that one image, and that one statement. And I don't think it takes a lot of imagination to extend this passage and this understanding of neighbor into creation itself. The church over the years has reflected on this passage a lot around our neighbor, and basically it boils down to our neighbor doesn't have anything to do with geographic proximity. Well, mostly doesn't. I mean, we know our neighbors, hopefully, but being a neighbor doesn't really have that much to do with geographic proximity. It has more to do with a shared experience, a shared reality, and the idea of having compassion and understanding. And so we've used that language a lot around our neighbor being pretty much anyone and everyone whom we come in contact with. And so I think this passage could have a lot to say to us right now in our particular circumstances, because we have this shared experience right now. Everything that's happening right now, I mean, these are extraordinary times. This has never happened before, except it feels pretty familiar as well, in that we've witnessed some of these things around the world before. We've witnessed crises, tsunamis and wars and famines and pandemics and all around the world where we've witnessed, and our hearts have gone out to folks, even if we don't totally understand or understand the circumstances or understand all the reality of it. Our hearts still are touched by it, and so we send money, we say prayers, we try to become aware, and but they happen someplace else. And then there are times when we've actually ourselves had some crises. We've had floods and fires and hailstorms, and so as regions, we understand, or we've had that kind of regional experience as well. And then in our own personal lives, I mean, we've had health crises, we've had losses. I mean, these aren't new experiences. What's new is that this is a worldwide human experience, and so I think in my understanding, this would be the first time in history where we've really been drawn together in a very imminent, tactile, in our face kind of common fate, where what I do actually matters, not just locally, but beyond. What we do as a province, as we do as a country, I mean, we're all in this together. And it's kind of a cliche, but it's never been more true, that we are all neighbors now, or we're all competitors, scrambling for scarcity. And we can see those examples regionally, locally, in the country, where the news is full of stories of those who choose to see the other as competitor, and so they hoard and grab and scowl at each other and have no grace. And then there are multiple stories about people being neighbors, people leaving notes on other people's doors saying, if you need anything, phone this number and I'll get it for you. Not just helping agencies, but people taking it on themselves. And so I think there's this real opportunity for us to understand our common fate and how big the neighborhood is and who our neighbor is. And really all of creation is our neighborhood. And we are all neighbors. And we can come out the other side of this very differently than we went into it. And so, as people of faith, we are called to make every decision and to go into every circumstance as neighbor, extending oneself for neighbor into the neighborhood. And there's a balance there, because we're also called to love ourselves. So it's not about putting ourselves in danger or any of those things. And so that's where this story breaks down. So, but as far as how we see our world and experience our world, the world's never been smaller. And the world's never needed neighborliness more than today. And so, so I'm not sure where we go from here exactly, how that'll look different. But I think it begins with our own understanding of what it means to be a disciple and what it means to be people of faith, and that we model that. And I think we do. I think as a faith community, we do model neighborliness. In our creed, and at the end of every sermon, I remind us that we are not alone. We live in God's world, and we share this world with each other. And so the call is to love our neighbor. It's never more important than this day, today, that even as we look after ourselves and our families, as we care for that we don't spread COVID-19, that is loving the world and loving your neighbor. And so we are not alone. We live in God's world, and we do have each other. Thanks be to God.